Okay, in Ghost Stories, we left off on page 23. I think we finished the top here, so we're going to start at Ghostly Bells and Boots in a lumberjack's bunkhouse. Just wanted to make sure that it's recording. Yeah, I see the timer going, so let's get started. Dennis M. stated that his father was born in 1907 in Nova Scotia and had once worked in the woods as both a lumberjack and a cook. One night during the winter of 1935, just after the men had retired for the night, they were awakened by the sounds of a sleigh coming to the door. The personal experience of Dennis M. They heard the bells on the horse, the sleigh runners squeaking on the snow, and the driver holler, "Whoa!" Of course, everyone got up and rushed to the door to meet the visitor. However, there was no visitor, no sleigh marks, no hoof prints from the horses, nothing. The event that finally chased everyone out of the bunkhouse was when the ghost drove the sleigh up to the door, got off the sleigh, opened the door, and walked in. Dad said that you could hear the boots walking across the floor. Clip clop, clip clop. It horrified everyone. Lumberjacks began throwing their boots and whatever else at the ghost. Dad said he finally got a lantern lit, and just like before, there was no evidence of anyone or anything being there. Join me in the crawl space. Okay, so from the files of the Ghost to Ghost website here, the personal experience of Anonymous. One day I was working with a friend in a brand new home in Ogden, Utah. We were doing the heating and air conditioning. My friend was checking the furnace and discovered it had a bad transformer, so he left to go get a new one. While he was gone, I continued installing the ductwork. I got an eerie feeling and looked over my shoulder and saw an old woman standing at the base of the stairs. I figured she was the homeowner. I said hi and asked her if she needed anything. She just shook her head no and smiled. I went about my business. Then I felt the same eerie feeling. I looked over my shoulder and let me fix this a little bit. I looked over my shoulder and there she was about 5 feet from me. I got off my ladder and said, "Can I help you?" She smiled and once again shook her head no. Just then I heard my partner pulling around the house. I returned to see where the woman was, and she was already by the base of the stairs about 50 feet away. I said, "Are you sure you don't need anything?" She just looked at me and motioned with her finger for me to come with her. Of course, I said, "No way." Then I heard my friend enter the home on the first floor. The old woman again motioned for me to follow her. She was backing toward a crawl space just under the stairs. I took my eyes off her for a second to try to figure out where my friend was, and when I looked up, I saw the most horrifying old woman motioning to me with a bony, leathery finger. This time she said, "Get over here." I watched her disappear into the crawl space. That was it. I got out of there fast. Finally, my friend joined me, and I told him the story. He just laughed and told me to stay outside if it would make me feel better. And that's exactly what I did. I did some research on that area, and I learned that most of the land had been used as a Native American tribal burial ground. To this day, I haven't returned to that site. How we rid our home of ghosts. The personal experience of Frank Joseph, author of Edgar Cayce's Atlantis and Lemuria and the Destruction of Atlantis. Sorry, that's Casey's. In spring 2000, my wife Laura and I moved with our kitty Sally into a rented house overlooking the Wisconsin side of the Mississippi River. It was a small place, just the right size for 3 of us, and out in the country, about 2 hours drive from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Not even our landlord could determine the age of the original structure. A local man told us he saw it often as a boy in the early 1950s whenever he canoed past our neck of the river. In the mid-1990s, the house was purchased by a retired couple from Arizona. They worked hard turning it into a sweet summer home, planting evergreen trees and a variety of flowers nearby. The exterior was remodeled in attractive redwood siding, while a new room with floor-to-ceiling glass panels provided a 180-degree view of the Mississippi. But winters in this part of the world can be brutal. Before the century was up, the pair returned to the milder climate of Arizona. Their dream vacation home was sold to a realtor who put it up for rent. We moved in just 7 months after our wedding and could not believe our good fortune in finding such a wonderful little place. That first summer, I was walking with Sally in the backyard when a van rolled up into the driveway. An overweight man in his late 60s hauled his 6-foot-plus frame out from the driver's side, while a cheerful little blonde lady of approximately the same age emerged from the passenger's door. The big man did not look entirely pleased to see me and pointedly asked what I was doing here. After I explained that I was a renter, he forced a gruff smile while introducing himself and his wife as owners in the previous decade. His wife was obviously a genuinely nice lady and smiled to see that the perennials that she had planted so many years before were still in bloom. I had encountered her husband's type before. He inducted me into a private tour of the house he rebuilt, grandly boasting of this improvement or that addition, emphasizing the labor and expense that everything everything had demanded of him. I dutifully expressed appreciation at polite intervals. There was less sentimentality than ego. In his presentation, he was obviously proud of having fixed up the old place, but I also sensed something akin to regret in his voice and choice of words. Perhaps Arizona wasn't all it was cracked up to be when he learned the amount of money we were paying. An impertinent question in any case, he expressed dismay and promised to inform our landlord that we were being charged far too little each month for the privilege of staying at his house. I was glad when this oversized troublemaker climbed back into his van and disappeared in the direction of the American Southwest before carrying out his threat. I hope never to see him again. My hope came true. 2 years thereafter, I learned from someone in town who had known him during the brief period of his residence here that he had died recently in Arizona. In any case, I had by that time period well put him out of my thoughts. About the same time, however, a number of peculiar incidents at home began to convince Laura and me that we were being visited by a discarnate entity. Nothing ever before suggested we were being haunted, but now we caught fleeting glimpses of a fast-moving shadow from time to time when we least expected to see such a thing. We did not mention these encounters to each other at first, dismissing them in our own minds as some kind of trivial optical illusion. It was only after the smells began that we spoke openly of the shadow. At first, rarely, then more frequently. Laura and I might be at other ends of the house when we would be overtaken by a very pleasant scent. To me, it smelled like delicate perfume. Laura thought it was closer to a man's cologne. Sometimes we encountered the scent together, but in every instance, it came and drifted away after only a few minutes. If we had to be haunted, Laura said it might as well be by a pleasant ghost. Although the perfume or whatever wasn't variably associated with the feeling of another presence, and neither of us were ever afraid. After about a month of such unpredictable visits, however, the quality of these redolent visitations began to deteriorate. I was working at my computer in the river room, 3 rooms away from Laura, who was sitting up in bed reading when an unspeakably foul odor surrounded me. The stench was comparable to the most nauseating animal excrement one might encounter. It startled me, but I could not imagine its source. Then almost... Sorry, let me fix these. Sorry about that. I'm OCD perfectionist. It startled me, but I could not imagine its source. Then almost as quickly as it manifested itself, the poisonous vapor was gone. Laura had been unaware of any foul stink in our home, but over the next few days and weeks, she too was sometimes overtaken by the repulsive smell of fecal matter, which seemed to come and go on a non-existent breeze. Interestingly, the stench never pervaded the whole house or even an entire room, but always confined itself to our immediate personal vicinity. Once, when Laura was outside tending the flowers growing under our front windows, she was suddenly enveloped in an invisible puff of strong cigar smoke. The incident confirmed our suspicions that we were being haunted by the recently deceased former owner, who had been a confirmed cigar smoker. Apparently, he was still annoyed that we were living in the house to which he had been so attached in life, and he wanted to stink us out. To fumigate our house of this unwanted boar, we tried several suggested dehaunting methods, all very nice appeals to his higher self to see the light while expressing understanding for his sense of loss, and so forth. Among other things, we tried smudging all the corners with burning sage and lighting candles for the departed. The evil smells continued unabated. In fact, things began to escalate. One night, while trying to fall asleep, I sensed a large, dark presence in the bedroom. It glided over to me and seemed to hover just over my head, and I was the recipient of a telepathic command. I want to know your thoughts. At this point in our ghostly relationship, I was more annoyed than frightened, and I told our redolent house guest, "You can do whatever you want. I'm going to sleep." With that, the disappointed shadow man vanished, but only temporarily. Both Laura and I experienced horrific nightmares, real psychodrama. Hold on. Real psychodramas that seemed to have nothing to do with our identity, as though they had been intruded somehow into our vulnerable subconscious mind. Still, we continued our feel-good New Age remedies, all without effect. Instead, we began to hear the sounds of terrified crashes, as though something huge had fallen over somewhere in the house, causing terrible damage. Once I thought the water heater exploded. Every time on investigation, however, nothing was found amiss. After the better part of a year, our patience had run out. One evening, while sitting down to dinner, the stench abruptly covered us like a putrescent cloud. We sprang up to our feet, and as if with one voice shouted. I don't think this makes sense here. It clearly says, "and as if with one voice we shouted." That's an error right there. We shouted in the direction of the stink. "Get out of here. You're not welcome here. You don't live here or anywhere anymore. This is our house. We're here now, and you can't stay. No dead people allowed. Out, out, out. We don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. No freeloaders allowed. Get it straight. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. Get out and never come back." Since then, ours is the sweetest smelling little home you could ever know. A most peculiar barking ghost. The personal experience of Patrick. In 1990, shortly after Debbie, her 3-year-old daughter, and I moved into this apartment, strange things began to happen. There seemed to be something else in the place with us. All these years later, I'm still asking myself what it was. Within the first week of moving in, I was awakened around 5 o'clock a.m. by what sounded for all the world like a small child barking like a dog. I sat up in bed. Debbie woke a few seconds later, and I listened to the sounds with me. It came from the hallway, so we assumed that her then 3-year-old daughter had gotten up in the wee hours and was pretending to be a puppy. Not all that unusual for a 3-year-old. I got up to put her back to bed, but as I opened the bedroom door, the sound moved down the hallway and into the living room. I followed, and it kept moving and barking at a distance of what I'd estimate was about 6 feet in front of me. As I got to the living room, the barking moved on into the next room, the kitchen. I stood in the living room and rationalized for a moment. The lights from outside the building were spilling into the room, and it slowly occurred to me that if the baby had been playing, I would surely have seen her cross the room between the hall and the kitchen. I listened to the puppy bark in the next room, and a chill went down my spine. I now had no idea what I was dealing with. The barking faded within the next moment, and I backed down the hall, ducking into the little girl's room, and of course, finding her sound asleep. I roused her and asked her if she'd been pretending to be a puppy. "No," came the expected groggy response. I carried her back to our room and put her between us in the bed. I stayed awake until it was time to get up for work, making certain the puppy didn't return. Of course, not certain what I'd do if it did. We never heard it again. A few months later, I was up in the middle of the night using the bathroom. I was in total darkness. No windows in the room, no light. just darkness. Suddenly, from the area to my left, which would have been the bathtub, I heard very clearly, sharp and loud enough to make me jump, a voice shout, "Bellyache!" The voice was that of a child, but there was something rough, almost gruff about it, as if the child in question was trying to do a voice. Of course, I flipped on the light. Nothing. Not that I was totally surprised. Less dramatic incidents became frequent enough so that Deb and I began to half joke about the apartment being haunted. Deb said that she had often seen the figure of a child moving up and down the hall past our bedroom door during the night. I remember her describing a little boy enveloped in a soft blue glow. She almost admitted this could have been a series of waking dreams. The last incident that I'll relate happened shortly before we moved out. Again, it was late at night. Our kitchen faucet leaked and dripped fairly noisily on occasion. I lay in bed listening to the drip. It had developed a steady rhythm, as drips will. Suddenly the rhythm changed. The drip sound itself changed in pitch, and the thing literally played a tune. Now I could write this off as my having fallen asleep and dreamed this, but at that point, after a few bars, Debbie groaned in disbelief next to me and asked, "Was that funeral march of the Marionettes, the theme music of the Alfred Hitchcock television series?" "Yeah," I answered, nodding in the dark. "That's what I heard." We both sighed deeply and held each other close to the rest of the night. While none of these incidents may fall under the classification of terrifying, they were certainly disturbing. I was glad that we moved when we did. Whatever was in that apartment seemed to have a consciousness. It seemed aware of us. And next time we will read Lively Ghosts in a Wisconsin Home, and so look forward to that. See you later, alligator.